Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on another reel that John brought to me. This is a Tsunami reel. This is the Tsunami Evict 2000. It's an okay reel. I am not really a great fan of Tsunami. Little things like this, the badge fell off, kind of just makes you wonder from time to time. But we're going to take this reel apart. We're going to service it, show you how to do that, how to keep this reel fishing, and get a little bit into the dynamics behind the reel itself. If you like these types of videos, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please use that notification button. That'll let you know when I am posting. And you'll get to see if that's a video that you would like to watch. Well, we're going to remove the handle. This is a handle with a kind of a leverage knob and ball bearing in it. The spool is set up as carbon drag washers, and we're going to remove the top next. We're going to take off the two shim washers for the spool height adjusters. And when I take my pieces and parts off, the smaller pieces and parts go into a parts tray. That way I can keep track of them when it's time to reinstall. Those three parts will just go into a corner of that tray, and now we have the top end rotor. And that rotor is held in with a retaining screw. So I'm going to remove that. While I do that, I want to encourage you to take pictures as you do the disassembly of your reel. Those pictures will be invaluable later on if you stumble in the reinstall. You can always go back and look at those pictures, find the orientations and the order in which they were removed, and kind of reverse that in terms of putting it back together again. Speaking of reverse, this rotor nut here is a reverse screw. You turn it clockwise to remove it, and there's a little plastic ferrule there that will go inside the pinion, and there's a little rubber seal on the other side of that. So just be aware of those pieces and parts as you continue your disassembly, so that when you put it back on, it works properly. This is the removal of the rotor. That's big enough that it doesn't need to go into my parts tray. And then the next segment up then is this cap and the pinion gear. What we're working towards is trying to remove the case, and I believe there's a screw under there. That's why we're going to go for these pieces next. Let's see what's under the cap first. I haven't worked on one of these in a while, but I find the Tsunami reels, the support is what really kind of bothers me. It's I think they have one support place. It's down in Florida, and the parts availability and general quality of the reels, I'm just not impressed with them. Okay, well, here's two small screws. I should remove the shield. Those two screws are going to go into my parts tray. Shield is up next. And immediately, this is exactly kind of something that bothers me with these reels. That spring should never have fallen off. That spring is the anti-reverse clutch override. Unfortunately, they don't put the clutch override in here. They just put the spring on. So they've adapted this to a general reel without the override. And they simply put a spring in here to push the pressure over and out. Well, such is life. All right. Let's take those three case screws out. I didn't see a case screw quickly when I was looking at the bottom of this reel, so that I think this bump guard is held in here by this screw. And a little point on the other side, and I believe there'll be a screw hiding underneath here once we remove this. Two more screws that are visible. I'll take those out next. Now these have a screw that can be used as a Phillips head or a flat blade, but I find that the flat blade usually is what's needed to break the seal of the installed screws. And it's easier for me with a Phillips head to remove the balance of it. When I take those screws out, I place them on my desk. I want to make sure that they're all the same size. And if there's one that's longer or shorter, I like to mark that position so that I know where to put it back in. And it may just be this screw is the same, I don't know. It's turning a little bit easier. All of those screws are the same, so we'll take those and put those into the parts tray. And now I think this is going to come down. I think this was being held in place by that top screw. There we go. So we have a big hook on that. And that's an example of what you want to make sure you're aware of as you're doing these reels. If you don't see something, go to the schematic, take your time, and well, don't pull or lever anything just by itself. That tends to snap and break, and particularly with the Tsunami, you probably have a hard time getting the replacement part. We're going to remove the two small case screws that are hiding under that bump guard. They are also Phillips head. We'll put those into the case as well. And then take pictures. I'm not quite sure why we have the open section here, but we do. And I guess we'll find out in a moment why we have that. This case should separate now. I'm just checking to make sure we have it all here. Should be able to just open it up this way. There we go. It's a little bit tight, but we have a sealed bearing on this side, so you don't need to do anything there. This is the internal architecture for this reel. You have a main gear. We have the pinion gear with the crosswind block on it. And this one is almost always stuck behind the main gear when you go to remove it. So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of treat this one almost like the Daiwa reels. We're going to take out the anti-reverse clutch because we got to get to the pinion gear anyway. So put that case up top there too. There's 3 screws that's on the retention part that's holding in your anti-reverse clutch. Same thing, put those on the table. Notice that this is not a symmetrical clamp, and that there is a little stud with a hole in that clamp. And 2 things always happen with that clamp. One of them is, what's the top side? It's easy enough to flip these around and try and install it upside down. It never works well. And the other is just paying attention to the orientation of the piece. Okay. So what I'm going to do with these when I put these in my parts tray is I'm going to lay it top facing up. That way I know when I go to reinstall, this is the top. Sometimes you'll find a tapered bevel in the holes for the screws. In this case, that's not there. All right, we have a shim washer that goes between the bearing and the rotor. Put that on the rotor. We should be able to pull this assembly up now and out. And you can see we have the free-flowing bearings on this, which just kind of drive me nuts. I'm going to leave that assembly there. Now I'm going to take the whole assembly here. Maybe that's why that section is out like it is. I'm going to remove the gear shaft, remove the main gear. This one has a double oscillation system here. It's driven by this oscillation gear. It shares that back drive with a secondary gear here. So this drive is actually driving 2 parts, and credit to them for that part of this design. It takes the stress off of the single point of contact in that oscillation gear. I'm going to clean it up and make sure that we have the channels cleaned on the teeth. I'm going to have to look up and see the cost of the Evict. Not sure where that stands. Tsunami has some very inexpensive reels, and then it has some very expensive reels. And, well, not sure where this falls on the sequence. But I've worked on Tsunami shields and the like, and some of the others. Like I said, overall, I'm not a fan of them. Okay. All right, good amount of grease onto the main gear. Set that aside for a moment. Try not to disturb this anti-reverse here because it's got all those free-floating bearings in it. They've got the rollers. Never fun. Okay, I'm going to take the screw out of the oscillation gear. Remove the oscillation gear. Remove the secondary oscillation gear. Make sure that the case is clean behind it. Again, we have a sealed bearing there, so we're okay with that. You don't need to oil or grease them. They're not going to absorb anything. Let's get the back end of the oscillation gear. The teeth and the face, everything on the oscillation gear gets greased because it touches multiple points within the reel. I'll lay that down for just a moment because this one's going to go in first. This is a two-step gear. The bottom step is for the oscillation gear. The top step is for the main drive. Merge in the oscillation gear now. Bring the stud down on that. It's always easier to replace this with the stud down. We'll bring this back. That grease is acting as a glue here, grabbing that screw. Okay, next up we can insert that main gear. Just let it lay loose. Now we have the axle shaft we want to clean off, and the guide. Clean that off as well. When you remove that guide, notice that there's two steps on it. One is a rounded edge, and the other one is a short edge that's going to fit in the case, so it's going to go in this way with that little rounded edge going up top. Get a little bit of grease onto that, and a little bit of grease onto your axle shaft. We can reinstall that. Bring that up through the case. Seat the You're going to look for two things now. You're going to need to seat the axle shaft over the stud on the gear, and then they're going to fit into the case here. Okay. On your gear, be very careful here with those roller bearings. They're held in by a spring, but they tend to jump. The bottom end of this is clean, so we're just going to refresh the grease on that. Again, you have a sealed bearing underneath, so you don't need to do anything with that sealed bearing. And if you see one of these little roller bearings break out, simply reinstall. Just push it back in, the spring will hold it. Come in over the top. What we're looking for now is to clear this. And we're also looking to seat it in the case. Just like that. That's a little harrowing experience from time to time. Just make sure you get it right. Take your time. All right. So what we've done is we've taken the reel apart. You don't oil those springs. With this in, before we close up the case, turn your Pinion gear, make sure everything's riding, make sure your crosswind block is doing its job, that the main gear is turning, everything's nice and smooth, nothing is out of alignment there. Once you do that, you can take the case and you can put that case back on so that nothing falls out of place. Make sure that your case has got a nice tight seam all the way around. And remember that you also have the bump guard on here. So before you go screwing or putting all the screws in, just put the two on the bottom to hold it for now. And you're going to want to do that because you've got to put that bump guard in. That's one. Here's the other. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you like to leave those questions in the comments section, I will try to answer those for you. That's the best way to get in touch with me. I know some folks try the phone number on the business card in the back. It's my apologies before you even try. That's a hard way to reach me. It is available. I eventually do get to the calls, but I'm much quicker. I usually answer the comment section questions in the morning, and generally that's a much more responsive way to do that. Okay, those three are in. What I will do next is I will go to the bump guard. Now the bump guard has the long tag that's going to be held in by this screw. It also has a little hole on the bottom which is going to go over this stud. So line those up as you bring them in. Make sure you get that nice solid click. Make sure that the hole is aligned here. And then you can put that next screw in. And there's one more screw after this that goes on the bottom. So that'll complete the lower end of the case. Seems like a couple of manufacturers have used this approach in terms of that pinion gear has to come out, the axle shaft has to go under. That happens with some of the Daiwa reels as well. Okay, case is done. Just before you do anything else, just go ahead and do that one more time. Make sure that you're comfortable that it's been installed properly. Next up then, we're going to take the tie down for the pinion gear. This is where you need to align the holes. There we go. Eventually you'll find it. Now we have the 3 small screws that hold that on. And those of you that watch my videos know me and small screws don't necessarily play well together all the time, so if we drop these or whatever, you understand. That's one that's down. I have the 2 holes aligned. There was no stud with that third, that hole, that screw there. So I'm thinking maybe this has got a multiple use to it in terms of the tie down. It might be used on more than one reel. But let's get the second one in. Then we'll show you where that spring fell out and how to set that. I guess if you look for design points, you'd say that's probably a weak design point. Most of the springs you're going to find on those anti-reverse assemblies are pull springs. This is a push. Most of the ones that you find are going to have hooks on both sides to hold it as a retainer. All right. This one has a top and a bottom to it. You'll notice this spring is laying to the bottom. If I recall, the way that this is going to line up is it's coming this way. So you put it in on the top like that. Make sure that it aligns with this plastic cap. And here's the nerve part. You want to compress that spring without shooting it. Always fun. And put it onto that stud there. Or you can do it the other way. Let's try it the other way. It's probably easier. Top goes that way. Pull that back, put this in. Bring that over. Yeah, that was easier. So that's how that spring installs. Oops, there you go, jumping ant. Let's try that again. I got lucky with that one. Sometimes those things wind up in the next zip code. And that's probably what happened on this one, when that shield opened up there. Okay, I got it now. Grab the shield. There again, that's meant to sit over the anti-symmetrical, I guess, is that the right word? Non-symmetrical retention plate for that pinion gear. We'll grab the screw here, and we're getting close to the point where the basic gearing assembly stuff is done. This is probably an example of what I'm talking about. That screw is magnetic, which means it's steel, which means it's not stainless. And that means, generally speaking, some point in the future, if you get salt intrusion there, that screw is going to wind up rusting. I've switched over to a micro driver that the head on the other one wasn't holding the screw. I keep the tools close by just to make sure that if needed, I don't have to lay the project down to do that. Let's tighten that down. Okay, next up then would be the rotor. Remember, you have that shim washer on top of the bearing there. If you don't put that on, it's going to turn very tight. On the nut here, there is a plastic inset there that goes to hold the axle shaft tight. There's a rubber water seal on the top of that. And remember that this is a reverse threaded nut. So it's going to come on in a counterclockwise manner. Tighten up your rotor nut. And get the tie-down screw for the rotor. So this is a 2000 series. It's generally a lower capacity pond reel, but this one's bigger than a lot of the 2000s that you'll find in the marketplace. This one's set up for braid. It's set up for saltwater use. That's where John's been fishing these inshore reels. These are shim washers that control the height of the spool. If the line is gathering too high, you need to put another shim washer in. If it's gathering too low, you need to remove a shim washer. Before I put the spool on, let's go check the drag system. A lot of times these are felt washers in these. We're going to check them out, see what we got. Make sure that they're clean, and make sure that they are serviced before we put them back in. Well, these are not felts. These are a fabric washer. This is a 6-drag set. 3 washers, 3 metals. And since they're fabric, we can put grease on these. And I'm going to use a drag washer grease. It's called Cal's Universal Drag Grease. You want to put some grease on and then wipe it off so that you can see the cross hatching on the washer itself. First of the metal ones goes in next. So the second washer, I just put a little bit on. I use my gloved hand as a tool. Make sure you can see the cross hatching. The middle washer, it's called an eared washer. It goes in the slots in the spool like that. And the last of the washers. And we'll spin that around. Now that grease isn't supposed to make washers slippery. That's not the intention of that. The intention of that grease is to keep the washers lubricated so that they don't dry out. Okay, then you install your clip to hold that in. It's a retention clip. Now we can put that on the reel, and we can attach the drag button. We want to make sure that we oil the seams on the bail. You do not need to remove the bail during a general service. You want to oil the line roller and just flip it a couple of times just to work that in. With that done, let's grab the handle, put the handle on, give it a test. Okay, so what have we done? We've completely taken this apart. We've shown you some of the design issues, showed you how to work around and remove some of those pieces and parts. We inspected them, we cleaned them, we re-lubricated them, we reassembled the reel. So it's time for a final test here, and well, here we go. It turns nice and free and easy. Make sure that you have that anti-reverse where you're playing around with that spring, right? And we've got the automatic stop there. Nice smooth bail trip. This reel's ready to go fishing again. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. That's the Tsunami Evict 2000, and well, it's been serviced. I hope you've enjoyed that. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. I truly appreciate your efforts. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, get your reels, rods, tackle tuned up. The fishing season is almost here. Be ready to go. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody a great day.